Imagine discovering that everything you lived for the past 20 years was a carefully constructed lie. Imagine that the man you swore to love was, in reality, two different people. This is the true story of David, a successful executive who maintained two complete families in two different cities for 2 decades. Two wives, two homes, two sets of children who never knew about each other's existence. Until a simple click on social media destroyed the most elaborate house of cards you've ever heard of. Get ready, because this story will challenge everything you believe about trust, love, and how far someone can go to keep a lie alive. David Morrison seemed to have it all figured out. At 42 years old, he was a senior executive at a major logistics firm, managing operations between the Midwest and the Southeast. His salary was impressive, his reputation impeccable, and his life, at least on the surface, appeared perfectly balanced. In Chicago, David lived in a beautiful brownstone in Lincoln Park with his wife Sarah and their 3 children, Emma, 16, Jake, 13, and little Sophie, just 9 years old. Sarah, a pediatric nurse, had met David at a hospital charity event 20 years earlier. She fell in love with his charm, his ambition, and his unwavering dedication to building a life together. He was the kind of husband who remembered anniversaries, who kissed her goodbye every Monday morning before heading to the airport, and who always called from his hotel room to say goodnight to the kids. Every week, like clockwork, David boarded a plane to Miami for what Sarah believed were crucial business meetings. The company was expanding its southern operations, he explained, and he needed to be on the ground, managing relationships with clients and overseeing the logistics hub. It made sense. It was believable, and for 20 years, Sarah never questioned it. But in Miami, in a sunlit condo in Coral Gables, David became someone else entirely. Here he was Mark Sullivan, a widow who had tragically lost his first wife to cancer 7 years into their marriage. He had no children from that relationship, he told Jennifer, the woman he met at a business conference in South Beach. He was ready for a second chance at love, ready to build the family he never had. Jennifer, a real estate agent with a warm smile and an optimistic spirit, saw in Mark exactly what he wanted her to see, a man scarred by loss but hopeful for the future. They married within a year, and soon Jennifer gave birth to their daughter, Lily, followed 2 years later by their son, Mason. Mark was present, attentive, and loving. He worked remotely several days a week, he explained, traveling occasionally to Chicago for business. But Miami was home. Jennifer was home. The logistics were staggering. David maintained 2 phones, 2 email accounts, 2 social media profiles under different privacy settings. He had memorized 2 sets of birthdays, 2 anniversary dates, 2 completely separate calendars of school events, doctor appointments, and family obligations. His credit cards were meticulously organized, one set for Chicago, another for Miami. He rented a small office space in each city where he could receive mail and maintain the illusion of stability. The travel schedule was exhausting but predictable. Mondays through Wednesdays, he was David in Chicago. Thursdays through Sundays, he was Mark in Miami. Holidays required creative planning. Thanksgiving with Sarah's family one year, Jennifer's the next. Christmas was split, with elaborate excuses about work emergencies or last-minute business trips that conveniently allowed him to celebrate with both families, just days apart. He became a master of compartmentalization. When he was David, Mark did not exist. When he was Mark, David was a distant memory, locked away in a separate part of his mind. He never mixed up names, never confused details, never slipped. For nearly 2 decades, David Morrison lived as 2 men, loved 2 women, and raised 2 families, all while maintaining the facade of normalcy in both worlds. But perfection is exhausting, and even the most carefully constructed lies eventually begin to crack. The sheer complexity of maintaining 2 families would have broken most people within months. But David was not most people. He was meticulous, calculating, and terrifyingly disciplined. Every aspect of his double life was engineered with precision, from financial management to emotional availability. Financially, David had structured his life like a corporate operation. His base salary was substantial, but he supplemented it with bonuses, consulting fees, and carefully managed investments. He maintained separate bank accounts for each family, explaining to Sarah that his frequent travel required dedicated business accounts, and assuring Jennifer that his Chicago-based work necessitated separate financial arrangements. Both women trusted him completely. Why would they not? He paid the bills on time, provided comfortably for his children, and never gave them reason to doubt his integrity. The mortgage on the Chicago brownstone was paid from one account. The condo fees in Coral Gables came from another. School tuition, groceries, utilities, all carefully categorized and separated. David even maintained 2 different financial advisors, 2 insurance policies, 2 sets of emergency funds. He filed taxes separately in each state, using the justification of work-related residency requirements that neither Sarah nor Jennifer understood well enough to question. But the financial engineering was nothing compared to the emotional choreography. David was present for both families in ways that seemed impossible. He attended Emma's volleyball games in Chicago and Lily's dance recitals in Miami. He helped Jake with math homework via video calls when he was in Florida, and coached Mason's little league team on weekends when he was in Illinois. He remembered every birthday, every milestone, every small detail that made each child feel seen and loved. The children adored him. In Chicago, Emma often bragged to her friends about how her dad always made time for her, even with his demanding job. Jake looked up to his father as a model of success and dedication. Little Sophie waited by the door every Monday morning to give him one last hug before he left for the airport. In Miami, Lily believed her father hung the moon. She wrote school essays about how Mark Sullivan was her hero, the man who showed her that love could bloom even after tragedy. Mason idolized his dad, treasuring the fishing trips they took every Sunday morning before Mark had to fly back to Chicago for work. David compartmentalized his emotions with surgical precision. When Sarah cried about missing him during his long work weeks, he held her close and promised it was all for their future. When Jennifer expressed concern about the strain of his travel schedule, he reassured her that it was temporary, that soon he would be able to work fully remote from Miami. He lied with such sincerity that even he began to believe his own fabrications. Holidays were the ultimate test of his deception. One Thanksgiving, David told Sarah he needed to leave Friday morning for an emergency client meeting in Miami. He spent Thursday with her family, carving turkey and playing board games with the kids, then caught a red-eye flight to Florida. By Friday afternoon, he was sitting at Jennifer's parents' table, laughing and sharing stories as Mark, the devoted son-in-law who had graciously adjusted his work schedule to be there. Christmas was divided with mathematical precision. December 23rd and 24th with one family, December 25th and 26th with the other. He rotated each year, explaining work obligations, family emergencies, and client demands with such conviction that neither woman ever suspected the truth. But the isolation was crushing. David had no real friends. He could not afford the risk. Co-workers knew him only superficially. He declined social invitations, avoided deep conversations, and kept everyone at arm's length. He was beloved by 2 families, but truly known by no one. He lived in a prison of his own design, constantly vigilant, constantly performing, constantly terrified that one mistake would bring everything crashing down. The psychological toll was immense. David developed insomnia, taking sleeping pills to quiet his racing mind. He suffered from stress-related headaches and digestive issues. He drank more than he should have, using alcohol to numb the anxiety that gnawed at him during every flight, every phone call, every moment he had to be one person while hiding another. Yet he persisted. Year after year, lie after lie, David maintained his double life with almost superhuman determination. He convinced himself it was sustainable, that he could keep both families happy indefinitely, that he was somehow doing the right thing by giving love and stability to 2 sets of children who deserved a father. But deep down in the quiet moments between identities, David knew the truth. He was living on borrowed time, and when the collapse came, it would be absolute. What do you think about what you have seen so far? Does this story sound familiar in any way? Have you ever wondered how someone could maintain such an elaborate deception? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon in February. David was in Chicago, sitting at the kitchen table helping Sophie with her science project when his Miami phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it, as he always did when he was with his Chicago family, but it buzzed again, and again, and again. Excusing himself to the bathroom, David checked his messages. It was Jennifer. Lily had fallen at school and broken her wrist. They were at the emergency room, and she was asking when Mark could get there. David's heart raced. He was supposed to fly to Miami the next morning, but this was urgent. Jennifer needed him now. He made a decision that would haunt him. He told Sarah that a critical client situation had emerged, and he needed to fly out immediately. Sarah, ever understanding, kissed him goodbye and wished him luck. Within 3 hours, David was on a plane to Miami, arriving at the hospital just before midnight to find a tearful Jennifer and a brave little Lily with her arm in a cast. But the lie required another lie. He told Jennifer he had been finishing a late meeting in downtown Chicago when he got her messages and caught the first available flight. The timeline was tight, almost too tight, but Jennifer was too relieved to see him to question the details. That close call shook David. For the first time in 20 years, he realized how fragile his carefully constructed world truly was. One emergency, one unexpected event, and the entire facade could crumble. Then came the questions. Emma, now 16 and increasingly aware of the world around her, started asking more pointed questions about her father's work. Why did he always travel to the same city? Why did not they ever visit him there? Why had she never met any of his colleagues or clients? David deflected, offering vague answers about corporate policies and client confidentiality, but he could see the doubt creeping into his daughter's eyes. In Miami, Jennifer began noticing inconsistencies. Mark mentioned a restaurant in Chicago he loved, but when she looked it up online, she found that it had closed 5 years earlier. He referenced a colleague by name, but later seemed to have forgotten ever mentioning that person. Small things, easy to explain away individually, but together they formed a pattern that made Jennifer uneasy. David started making mistakes. He called Sarah by Jennifer's name during a phone call, quickly covering it by claiming he had said General and she had misheard. He forgot Jake's basketball game, something he had never done before, and blamed it on a scheduling mix-up at work. He missed an anniversary dinner with Jennifer, confusing the date with Sarah's birthday, and had to send an extravagant flower arrangement and a heartfelt apology. The stress was breaking him. David's hair grayed rapidly. He lost weight. His hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was looking. He increased his drinking, downing whiskey in anonymous airport bars between flights, trying to calm the panic that threatened to consume him. His coworkers began to notice changes too. David, once sharp and focused, seemed distracted, forgetful. He missed meetings, filed reports late, and made uncharacteristic errors in his work. His boss called him into the office, expressing concern about his performance and asking if everything was all right at home. David assured him it was just stress from the heavy travel schedule, promising to improve. But the truth was, he was drowning. Then came social media. David had always been careful, maintaining minimal online presence under both identities, with strict privacy settings that kept his two worlds separate. But he could not control what others posted. One evening, Sarah's sister tagged the whole family in a photo from a recent gathering. David was in the background, clearly visible, smiling next to Sarah. The photo was public. Emma shared it to her own profile. Within hours, it had been seen by hundreds of people. In Miami, Jennifer's best friend was scrolling through recommended connections on Facebook when she saw something strange. A man who looked exactly like Mark, but the profile said David Morrison. Same face, same smile, but different name, different city, different life. She showed it to Jennifer, laughing about how everyone has a doppelganger somewhere in the world. Jennifer stared at the photo. The resemblance was not just close, it was exact. Same scar above the left eyebrow from a childhood accident Mark had told her about, same distinctive watch he wore every day, same everything. Her hands shaking, Jennifer saved the image and began searching. David Morrison, Chicago. The results were limited, privacy settings blocking most information, but there were fragments. A mention in a company newsletter, a tag in a community event photo. And there, in another image, partially visible, was a woman and children standing next to the man who looked exactly like her husband. Jennifer felt the room spin. It could not be. It was impossible. But the evidence was there, staring at her from the glowing screen of her phone. She did not confront Mark immediately. Instead, she started watching, noticing things she had overlooked before. The way he never video called when he was supposedly in Chicago. The way he always had an excuse for why she could not visit him there. The way certain topics made him tense and evasive. In Chicago, Emma was doing her own investigation. She had always been proud of her father, and when a school assignment required students to research their family history, she decided to dig deeper into the Morrison lineage. She asked her father for information about his parents, grandparents, any documents or records he might have. David panicked. He provided minimal information, claiming most family records had been lost in a fire years ago. But Emma was persistent. She wanted to do a DNA test, one of those popular ancestry kits that could trace genetic heritage and potentially connect her with distant relatives. David forbade it, his reaction sharp and uncharacteristically harsh. It was a waste of money, he said. Those tests were not accurate. There was no point. But his overreaction only made Emma more curious. Why was her father, usually so supportive of her interests, suddenly so opposed to this? Thank you so much for staying with us until this point. Your attention means everything, and I promise you the best is yet to come. What unfolds next will leave you absolutely speechless. The end came not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a simple notification on a smartphone screen. It was Jake, the 13-year-old son from Chicago, who unknowingly detonated the bomb. For his birthday, Sarah's parents had given him a DNA ancestry kit, one of those popular genetic testing services that promise to reveal your ethnic background and connect you with distant relatives. Jake thought it would be cool to see his genetic makeup, maybe discover he had Viking ancestors or distant cousins in Ireland. He swabbed his cheek, mailed the sample, and forgot about it for 6 weeks. In Miami, Lily, now 14, had received the exact same gift from Jennifer's parents that Christmas. She too was curious about her heritage, excited to explore her genetic background and maybe find some interesting relatives in the process. Neither child knew the other existed. Neither parent realized what was about to happen. The notifications arrived on the same day in March. Jake received an email from the DNA testing company. "You have new DNA relatives?" Curious, he opened the app and saw a list of matches. The closest one, sharing an unusually high percentage of DNA, was labeled as a half-sibling. The name was Lily Sullivan, age 14, location, Miami, Florida. Jake stared at the screen, confused. A half-sibling? That was impossible. He had 2 sisters, Emma and Sophie, and no one else. There had to be a mistake. In Miami, Lily received the same notification. She had a half-sibling match. His name was Jake Morrison, age 13, location, Chicago, Illinois. Lily showed the result to her mother, laughing about how the test must have made an error. Jennifer looked at the screen, saw the name Morrison, and felt her blood turn to ice. The doppelganger she had seen months ago on social media, the man who looked exactly like her husband, David Morrison. Her hands trembling, Jennifer asked Lily for her phone. She opened the DNA app, clicked on the match, and saw additional information. Jake Morrison had 2 siblings listed in his profile, Emma Morrison, 16, and Sophie Morrison, 9. Jennifer's world shattered. Her husband was not Mark Sullivan, a widower who had found love again. Her husband was David Morrison, a man with an entire other family in Chicago. A wife, 3 children, 20 years of lies. She sat down, unable to breathe, unable to process the magnitude of the betrayal. Lily, seeing her mother's reaction, became frightened. "Mom, what is wrong? What is it?" Jennifer could not speak. She simply showed her daughter the screen, the evidence of siblings Lily never knew existed, proof that everything they had believed about their family was a lie. In Chicago, Jake showed the DNA results to his older sister Emma, thinking it was some kind of glitch. Emma, already suspicious about their father's secretive behavior, took the phone and began investigating. She searched for Lily Sullivan on social media and found her profile. A teenage girl in Miami. Her photos showed her with her family, a mother named Jennifer, a younger brother named Mason, and a father whose face made Emma's heart stop. It was her father, exactly her father, not a lookalike, not a doppelganger, him. Emma's hands shook as she scrolled through the photos. Her father at the beach with Lily and Mason. Her father celebrating Christmas with Jennifer's family. Her father kissing a woman who was not her mother. Her father living an entire life that Emma and her siblings knew nothing about. She stumbled to her mother's room, phone in hand, unable to form words. Sarah looked up from her book, saw her daughter's face, and knew immediately that something terrible had happened. "Mom," Emma whispered, her voice breaking, "Dad has another family." Sarah's first reaction was denial. It was impossible. There had been a mistake. But Emma showed her the DNA results, showed her the photos, showed her the overwhelming evidence that the man she had loved and trusted for 20 years had been lying to her every single day. Sarah called David's phone. It went to voicemail. She called again and again. She sent texts. "Call me immediately, emergency." But there was no response. David was on a plane from Miami to Chicago, his phone in airplane mode, completely unaware that his double life had just been exposed. He was thinking about the week ahead, mentally shifting from Mark back to David, preparing to be the devoted Chicago husband and father once again. He landed at O'Hare Airport at 8 p.m., turned on his phone, and watched as it exploded with notifications. Texts from Sarah, missed calls, voicemails. His heart sank. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. He listened to the first voicemail. Sarah's voice was cold, controlled, terrifying in its calmness. "I know about Jennifer. I know about Lily and Mason. I know everything. Do not come home. My lawyer will be in touch." David's legs nearly gave out. He stood in the middle of the airport terminal, people rushing past him, and felt his entire world collapse. 20 years of lies, of carefully maintained deception, destroyed in a single moment. His Miami phone buzzed, a text from Jennifer. "You lied to me. You lied to our children. You are not Mark. You are David. You have a wife and 3 other children. How could you? Do not contact us ever again." David Morrison, the man who had been 2 people for 2 decades, suddenly was no one at all. Both families knew the truth. Both families had cast him out. He was alone in an airport terminal with 2 phones, 2 identities, and nowhere to go. He sat down on a bench, buried his face in his hands, and for the first time in 20 years stopped pretending. The mask was gone. The performance was over. The lie had finally caught up with him. And the consequences were only beginning. The aftermath of David's exposure was devastating, complex, and played out across 2 cities, 2 families, and countless broken hearts. In Chicago, Sarah filed for divorce immediately. The betrayal was so profound, so all-encompassing, that there was no possibility of reconciliation. She hired a prominent family law attorney who was both shocked and fascinated by the case. The legal complexities were staggering. David had maintained 2 households, 2 sets of financial obligations, and had essentially committed bigamy, though he had never legally married Jennifer. The financial investigation revealed the full scope of David's deception. He had earned far more than Sarah had ever known, siphoning off substantial portions of his income to support the Miami family while maintaining the illusion of a comfortable but not extravagant lifestyle in Chicago. Sarah was entitled to half of everything, but determining what everything actually meant became a legal nightmare that would take years to untangle. The emotional toll on the Chicago children was immense. Emma, at 16, felt her entire childhood had been a lie. The father she had idolized was a stranger, a man capable of systematic, long-term deception on a scale she could barely comprehend. She struggled with trust issues, unable to believe anything anyone told her, convinced that everyone was hiding something. Jake withdrew into himself, his grades plummeting, his social life disappearing. He refused to speak about his father, refused to process what had happened, simply shutting down emotionally to avoid the pain. Little Sophie, at 9, was the most heartbroken of all. She could not understand why Daddy was not coming home, why Mommy was crying all the time, why her siblings were so angry. She missed her father desperately and could not reconcile the man who had kissed her goodbye every Monday morning with the monster everyone was now describing. In Miami, Jennifer's devastation was compounded by the realization that her entire marriage had been built on lies. Mark Sullivan did not exist. She had never been married to a widower seeking a second chance at love. She had been the other woman in an elaborate scheme of betrayal, though she had never known it. The shame was overwhelming. Lily and Mason struggled to understand who their father really was. Lily had written school essays about Mark Sullivan, shared stories about his bravery after losing his first wife, built her entire understanding of resilience and love around his fictional narrative. Now she had to confront the fact that everything she believed about her father was false. Mason, at 11, became angry and defiant. He felt abandoned, betrayed, and furious at the man who had coached his little league team while secretly maintaining another family across the country. He refused to see David, refused to speak to him, and expressed his hurt through increasingly concerning behavior at school. The 2 families, connected by DNA and betrayal, existed in strange parallel realities. Sarah and Jennifer eventually spoke, a painful phone conversation in which 2 women who had never met shared the experience of loving the same man and being deceived by him in equally devastating ways. There was no friendship between them, no solidarity, just a mutual recognition of shared trauma. The half-siblings, connected through a DNA test that was meant to be a fun exploration of ancestry, now faced the reality of having brothers and sisters they had never known. Emma and Lily exchanged a few awkward messages, both unsure how to relate to each other, both victims of their father's choices. Jake and Mason never spoke at all. David, meanwhile, lost everything. His company fired him immediately when the scandal became public. The media picked up the story, and it went viral. "Executive maintains two families for 20 years" became a headline that generated millions of clicks, think pieces about modern masculinity, and debates about the psychology of long-term deception. He moved into a small apartment in a suburb between Chicago and Miami, equidistant from both families, close to neither. He attempted to maintain relationships with his children, but most refused contact. Sophie was the only one who agreed to see him, and even those visits were supervised and heartbreaking. David underwent court-ordered therapy, where he slowly began to unpack the psychology behind his actions. The therapist helped him understand that his double life was not about loving two women, but about a deep-seated fear of inadequacy and a compulsive need to be perceived as perfect. He had created two idealized versions of himself because he believed the real David Morrison was not enough. The financial settlements bankrupted him. Between child support for 5 children, alimony to Sarah, restitution to Jennifer for the years of deception, and legal fees that stretched into 6 figures, David found himself working 2 jobs just to meet his obligations. The irony was not lost on him. He had worked so hard to provide for 2 families, and now he could barely afford to support himself. As the years passed, some wounds began to heal, though scars remained. Emma eventually went to therapy and started processing her trauma, though she never fully forgave her father. Jake slowly re-engaged with life, finding solace in sports and eventually attending college far from Chicago. Sophie maintained the most contact with David, though their relationship would never be what it once was. In Miami, Lily channeled her pain into advocacy, eventually writing a book about her experience as a teenager who discovered her father's double life. The book became a bestseller and helped her process her trauma while connecting with others who had experienced similar betrayals. Mason forgave his father years later, though the relationship remained distant and complicated. Jennifer eventually remarried, finding love with a man whose honesty and transparency were the opposite of everything Mark or David had been. Sarah never remarried, choosing instead to focus on her children and her career, building a life defined by her own choices rather than anyone else's deception. David Morrison lived alone, working ordinary jobs, seeing his children occasionally, and carrying the weight of his choices every single day. He had wanted to be everything to everyone, and in the end, he became nothing to anyone. The price of his 20-year lie was the loss of everything he had claimed to value: his family's, his reputation, his sense of self. The story of David Morrison serves as a stark reminder that deception, no matter how carefully constructed, eventually collapses under its own weight. Trust, once broken on such a fundamental level, can rarely be fully repaired. And the people who pay the highest price for lies are often the ones who had no part in creating them. 2 families forever connected by betrayal. 8 people forever changed by one man's choices. 20 years of lies destroyed in a single moment. This is the legacy of the second family. Conclusion. This story leaves us with disturbing questions about human nature. How does someone manage to maintain such an elaborate farce for so long? Did the 2 women really never suspect anything, or did they choose to ignore the signs? And most importantly, did David really love both families, or was it all part of a bigger lie? We want to know, what would you do if you discovered your entire life was a lie? Could you forgive? Could you start over? Leave your opinion in the comments below, because stories like this make us question everything we think we know about the people closest to us. If you were impressed by this story, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next videos about real cases that defy imagination. And be sure to watch the next recommended video, where we reveal another shocking secret that changed lives forever.